So now I'd like to introduce our final speaker this morning before we have the Q&A discussion, the panel discussion. I'd like to introduce Hollie Sullivan, who's the lead teacher for EAL at the Great Barr Academy. Now, many of you may know that Great Barr Academy are one of the largest, if not the largest, secondary school in the country, with just shy of 2,500 pupils, with 57 home languages to support. So Hollie and her team are doing some really amazing work in supporting their EAL pupils. So let's invite Hollie to the stage to learn a little bit more.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. As Matt said, I think I've been asked today to speak genuinely because I'm very new to the role of EAL, and I've heard the line "I'm not an expert" said a few times today, and I have to actually put myself firmly in that camp. But as the new EAL coordinator for the largest school in the UK, I've had to implement quite a lot of new strategies very quickly in order to restructure our department completely. And so the hope is that if I can share some of those strategies with you today, they might be useful to you. There might be ideas that you can run with in your school, or ideas that you can at least adapt for your own circumstance. My background, I qualified as an English teacher in 2007. I've worked at Great Barr ever since, and a lot of my TLR responsibilities have been more towards the pastoral. However, the teaching side of my job was always heavily focused on SEN needs, and as the years went on, that increasingly became EAL as well. I was asked to be the inclusions coordinator, so tracking the progress of SEN and EAL pupils in the school, until eventually they've asked me to lead solely EAL whole school, which is what I'm doing now. I am really enjoying this job, and I have to say, if any of you have been to the PSS training on culture shock, I definitely describe myself as being in the honeymoon phase, but I'm well aware of the phases to come. So, as Matt's already said, our school's got the capacity to take on 2,500 students. We're currently standing at nearing 600, that figure's increased this week, nearing 600 EAL students. But as was mentioned earlier, actually EAL doesn't actually mean a lot anymore, because there's a massive difference between a new to English EAL student and a fluent EAL student. So if you categorise it down to the lower proficiencies, we're still catering for 172 students that need our support. And as you can see there, my department is relatively small in comparison to those numbers. With me leading the team, we've got an inductions coordinator, an assessments coordinator, and a Key Stage 4 coordinator. And I found that giving people individual roles to focus on within the department, it's a lot more productive. People know exactly what their job role is, people know what their area of expertise is, and it really has helped us out to have that staffing structure in place, even with just a small team of staff. So we started with assessments then. We were using the Bell Foundation's assessment when they first came in, but we weren't using that at the time to create proficiency codes, which we're now doing. So we're using the Bell Foundation for our baseline assessment. We're using their mark scheme to create a proficiency code on day one, and that's then helping us to decide where best to place them. I'll go on to induction in a minute, but what we've also added is a second assessment at the end of induction, and that way we can not only track the progress that's been made whilst they've been in our induction programme, but we can also then give them fresh placing for mainstream. We were finding that mainstream was becoming very overcrowded in the bottom sets, and that was counterproductive. So we're now using that second assessment to be able to see, okay, cognitively, where's the best place to place these students? And more pupils are leaving induction and going into middle and upper band settings now. We've split induction into two classes. We've got the pre-induction class, that's generally for the new to English or for the pupils, and we're receiving more and more of them who lack a complete prior education in their home languages, completely illiterate in their home languages. And in pre-induction, we're using a phonics programme, as well as trying to fit in as much Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 material as possible. We've then got mainstream induction, which is a crash course in subject vocabulary from around the school. So we're trying to give them as much of a starting point in terms of vocabulary for all of the subjects that they're going to be encountering into mainstream. And then as I've already said, we assess them at the end to see A, the progress that's been made, and B, where is the best place to put them once they go into mainstream. Once we do hand them over, we've had to put a lot of transitional support in place as well, because we were finding that staff weren't even being informed that EAL students would be arriving at their doors, and because they weren't being informed, I had a massive issue where staff were trying to send them back, which I said, no, we can't do that. So what I'm asking now is there's much better communication with staff. I'm emailing them with at least a week's notice that they will be having this child. This is their proficiency coding. This is the information that we have on them, and handing that information over to staff, which staff have been really receptive to getting that information. I'm asking that proficiency codes go on to seating plans, because, as I say, EAL doesn't mean anything anymore. And if you're being observed, it's very important that you are categorising exactly what sort of EAL we're talking about, so that we can, you know, support the fact that this differentiation is in place or this TA is in place, etc. For our lower proficiencies, I've also put individual language plans into place. So this is individualised to that student's needs, that student's levels, reading, writing, speaking and listening. What are their targets? How can they meet those targets? What strategies can mainstream staff use to support those pupils? And they're available for all staff at my school to print out and use in their planning. And more recently, we've introduced the idea of departmental panic boxes. So every department now in my school is going to be spending their Year 11 gain time over the summer putting together appropriate resources for their subject, but that are accessible to lower proficiencies. Now, if there is one challenge in my school, I would say it's capacity, in the terms of the amount of students we need to cater for in induction and the amount of space we have and staffing we have. We have to transition them perhaps earlier than we'd like. So what I'm aiming to do is give as much information and tools and support to mainstream staff in order to cope with that. And this department panic box is phase one of that plan for the future. Right, before I speak to you about Key Stage 4, I've just got a small video clip to show you, although we've got a slight technical hitch, so if you just bear with me 1 second. So when I first watched that video, I found myself initially nodding along to everything that the head teacher was saying at the beginning, because I think, especially to year 11, we've all given that speech, you know, these decisions matter, you have to take this seriously, these exams are going to change your life. And I think as adults, we yearn for the young people that we're in charge of to not make those mistakes, to actually realise how important this time in their lives is. But then when Jay stood up, I thought, well, actually, the adult in me stepped to one side, and the teacher in me started to say, no, every child is different. Every child has different talents, different timelines, different goals, and we need to nurture those children individually. And then I thought, well, if I feel like that about students in general, just imagine how much more relevant that is for EAL pupils. And when you factor in the timeline that it can take them 7 years to learn a language adequately enough to be assessed in it, I was having a lot of emails from Key Stage 4 teachers saying, this child's not going to be exam ready. They can't meet my timelines. They can't meet my deadlines. And so I'm saying to them, no, they can't. Don't expect them to. Okay? And a lot of them were asking me to take them out of their subjects. And I'm saying no, because in the future, once their language barrier is no longer an issue, they may decide to go back into education and resit these qualifications. And we need to give them as much subject knowledge foundational subject knowledge as we can from across the whole curriculum, so that they're equipped to make those choices as adults when their barriers are no longer in front of them. So instead, what I've introduced for option subjects at Key Stage 4 is an end-of-exam excusal form. So if a child is arriving and doesn't have the time to defeat their language barrier before the exam date, you can opt for them not to sit that exam. There's obviously criteria that needs to be met, but it's going to take the pressure off them, off the member of staff, but still keep them in the subject, still give them as much foundational knowledge as you can to set them up for their future. The other thing that we're thinking of is offering a home language GCSE in September. AQA and OCR alone offer over 15 languages at GCSE level, and if a child is arriving fluent in one of those languages, that's an extra qualification they can walk away with, almost self-taught. So that's something hopefully we're going to be implementing as well. FlashAcademy, I was actually really lucky. Matt emailed me a couple of weeks into my new role and said, can we meet, can I show you my product? And I was blown away when I met them and when I saw what FlashAcademy can do. We bought FlashAcademy for our EAL induction classes, and I'm desperate for a whole school licence now, because it really does promote inclusion. We've got 57 home languages at Great Barr Academy, and to try and teach from that many variables can be impossible. But every day for an hour, both of our classes at the same time merge and have a FlashAcademy lesson. They're all doing the same lesson at the same time, but from their home languages. And suddenly, the ability and the proficiency in the room disappears. Everyone's on an equal footing and everybody's able to work and learn together. And the ethos it's created has been absolutely fantastic. I personally am completely tech-phobic. I can't even get phones to work, but it really is easy. I don't need to call tech to come and help me with it. It's such a simple program to use. It reduces staff workload, it tracks the data, it emails me the data, and I can then take that data to leadership to show this is how the EAL students are progressing, and every single one of them has been showing better progress since we implemented FlashAcademy than they were previously. And I only found out this morning that they're thinking of implementing the new assessment, the digital assessment, and I saw heads nodding in the room, especially my assessments coordinator. Her head was nodding, because I think that's going to be an absolutely time-saving wonder when we've got that installed as well. The other side that we've been looking at is the pastoral side to EAL learners, and especially in a school of my size, it can be extremely daunting sending them out into mainstream. They're used to the small, nurturing environment of the EAL department, and then suddenly to send them out and have to navigate their way around a school with over 500 different rooms in can be very scary. So what we've actually implemented is a team of 25 EAL prefects, and what we do is match them up one-to-one one prefect per one induction pupil, and they look after them socially, break times, lunch times, help them to and from their next lesson. And I've actually got a waiting list of EAL prefects now, which is fantastic. I've got kids coming, Miss, put me on the waiting list, I want to do it, I want to do it. And it's just showing the positivity around the school of EAL at the moment, that the older kids, they want to help, and that's just worthwhile in my view. We've also got some sixth form EAL ambassadors who were new to English themselves once upon a time and have now progressed to the stage where they can sit A levels, and they're coming out to help in support in EAL induction once a week, giving up their free periods, just to be good role models, to show the younger pupils that actually they can be successful if they focus, work hard. This will happen for you, because I think it can be very frustrating for an EAL learner to think, this is going to take too long, I'm not getting it. It's a long road, but actually if you show them what the end product could be, that they could be sitting A levels in your sixth form, it motivates them and drives them and gives them that sense of confidence and achievement that they can do it. And finally, I'm working really hard to promote positive ethos for EAL school-wide. I think it's been mentioned briefly this morning, there can be a bit of a negative stigma sometimes about shoving them to one side and all of that. And what we've done is we've completely separated from the special needs inclusions unit now. We're now firmly a part of the English department, because I've said, EAL is not a special need, it's an English proficiency, and it needs to be viewed as such school-wide. And we're actually hosting a school-wide celebration every term. So in the autumn term, we're going to be hosting a PD day in which Year 7 will spend the whole day being taught from another language, so that they can empathise with what it feels like to not understand the language that's being spoken around you. And we're going to be using FlashAcademy as a tool to deliver those sessions. We are celebrating World Culture Day the week after next on the 21st of May, and all staff and students are invited to come to school dressed in clothing that celebrates their ethnicity, diversity and culture. So we've got a lot of exciting activities that happen that day, and that in particular has created a real buzz around my school. I've got loads of staff coming up to me telling me what they're going to wear, and it's creating an excitement around EAL. We've opened a homework club so that the pupils who transition into mainstream have actually got a way of coming back to us. I think that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. When you send them off, they seem to think they're never going to see you again. So it's just opening those doors for them to come back and communicate with staff that they've already built fantastic relationships with, and utilising those relationships to help them while they're in mainstream. And finally, we're going to be hosting an EAL end-of-year afternoon tea. So every child that has gone through induction this year will be invited back to one of the halls. We'll be treating them to afternoon tea, and we're going to be using it as a celebration as well, and handing out awards and certificates for pupils who have shown progress in mainstream, for pupils who have shown maturity by transitioning without a fuss, and all of those things. We're going to be inviting all the prefects and ambassadors to attend that as well. So it's really just about promoting the positive side of EAL, and how having that rich, diverse culture in your school, in your community, should be seen as a positive and can be beneficial school-wide. And hopefully these will help you do that. So thank you for listening.